As we reported earlier, the UN's top human rights body accused Myanmar's military of genocidal intent and gross human rights violations against the Rohingya, a Muslim minority in Myanmar. Myanmar's military launched their crackdown exactly a year ago. As Foreign Affairs correspondent Nick Schifrin reports, the UN report calls for top military generals to be investigated and prosecuted for crimes against humanity.
1 year ago, along the Myanmar-Bangladesh border, the Myanmar military unleashed horror. The UN says soldiers torched Rohingya villages and, in the aftermath, tortured men, killed indiscriminately, and carried out systematic sexual violence, creating an untold number of victims of gang rape. The UN says for years, the Rohingya have suffered institutionalized oppression from birth to death. In the past, they've been beaten and targeted by Myanmar authorities, but never on this scale. Newly released satellite images show a Rohingya village full of houses last May, and today cleared of life. Myanmar's military was responding to attacks by the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, or ARSA. 1 year ago, militants assaulted 30 Myanmar police posts. But today's UN report calls the subsequent crackdown wildly disproportionate, said UN fact-finding mission member Radhika Kumaraswamy.
The scale, brutality, and systematic nature of rape and violence indicate that they are part of a deliberate strategy to intimidate, terrorize, or punish the civilian population.
The terror worked. Hundreds of thousands fled their homes. Shell-shocked, they trudged through the mud to cross from Myanmar into Bangladesh, where they set up sprawling, squalid refugee camps. Hasina Begum's story was all too common.
They burned my village to ash. They shot my father, dead in front of me.
Special correspondent Tania Rashid has covered this story for us for the last year. And over the weekend, she saw how conditions have improved in the world's largest refugee camp.
Many have set up shops where they're selling belts and clothing for little children. Pharmacies have been set up where they're selling an array of medication like paracetamol for headaches. There are even cell phone shops where locals are purchasing phones so that they can stay in touch with their families in Bangladesh and even Myanmar. More than half of the population are children. A year later, they continue to struggle, where they've taken on adult-like tasks such as manual labor and carrying heavy loads, all to support their family. Local doctors say that many of these children also continue to suffer from malnutrition.
And Tania Rashid joins me now from Kutupalong Mega Camp in Cox's Bazar. Tania, how far have these refugees come 1 year later?
A year later, so much has changed. During the exodus, I've seen people sleeping on plastic sheets on the streets and openly defecating everywhere. Now it seems like with the humanitarian agencies that have taken over, there is much more organization in place. There are toilets, women-friendly spaces for survivors of sexual violence in place. And I've also seen that many Rohingyas have set up home here. They've been doing everything they can, from setting up shops and grocery stores, so that they feel like they have a sense of place, unlike before.
And there's a question of repatriating these refugees. Would they want to go?
The reactions have been very mixed. I've been hearing from some Rohingyas who have told me that there is no way that they would go back to the people who burned their villages, raped them, and murdered them in some instances. They believe that now that they're in Bangladesh, they will make Bangladesh their homes. Other Rohingyas have told me that they do want to go back. There's this sense of nostalgia of missing where they're from. But the only way they will go back is if their citizenship is guaranteed.
Tania Rashid, thank you very much. And I turn now to Dan Sullivan here with me in the studio. Dan Sullivan is the Senior Advocate for Human Rights at Refugees International. Thank you very much for being here.
Happy to be here.
We just heard Tania Rashid talk about improvements in some of these camps, and there are some improvements over the last year, but there's still a long way to go, especially on services, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's, it's come a long way from the chaos of the initial influx of refugees, but there are a lot of problems, particularly with the government of Bangladesh has refused to recognize the Rohingya as refugees. And one of the places we really see that coming across is with gender-based violence services and with the monsoon season. So there's still a long way to go.
Another place that there's perhaps a long way to go is back in Myanmar. And we heard Tania Rashid talk about how there are some refugees who would want to go home, but have the root causes that led to the violence, that led to the exodus, have any of those been addressed?
In a word, no. You still have, there's been no accountability. So the people who might go back, they have no guarantees for their safety. You have thousands of people who have continued to come into Bangladesh in 2018, no guarantees of citizenship or basic human rights. So no, the root causes have not been addressed in Myanmar.
The state councilor in Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel laureate, was faulted by the UN fact-finding mission today, who said that, quote, she contributed to the commission of atrocity crimes. Is she partially at fault?
Yeah, it's not a light kind of thing to say, but I think the fact-finding mission got it right. A lot of people have complained about Aung San Suu Kyi remaining silent, but it's worse than that. She hasn't just been silent. She's talked about, her office has talked about fake rapes in the light of this overwhelming evidence of mass rapes. She's blocked the fact-finding mission from coming in to investigate. Yeah, it's a tough thing to say, and it's important to remember that the greatest degree of responsibility is with the military. But yes, she absolutely should be singled out because she's effectively been an apologist for the military in the face of these really grave crimes.
And quickly, in the time we have left, the military is, of course, the headline in the UN fact-finding mission today, and they recommend half a dozen generals need to be prosecuted by the ICC, the International Criminal Court, or an ad hoc criminal court. Can these people, can the Myanmar military be held accountable?
Yeah, accountability is essential to get at those root causes. And there's a whole list of names in addition to what they named publicly. And the U.S. and other countries have placed some limited targeted sanctions, but there need to be more targeted sanctions, including on the Senior General Min Aung Hlaing. And I think there's other measures like global arms embargo, but what's really missing, and particularly from the U.S., is you haven't heard much from the top levels about what's going on, other than some letters and secondary denunciations. There hasn't really been anything. So in the light of these, some of the gravest crimes in our generation, the idea that the President of the United States would be virtually silent is just unthinkable.
But the U.S. government says that it's about to release its own fact-finding mission, right? So isn't the U.S. investigating this and doing something about it?
Yes, it's very important. They've surveyed over 1,000 different Rohingya refugees, and they have this evidence that's ready, but they haven't released it yet. So it's really important that the State Department report be released. And in addition to the UN fact-finding mission and what other organizations have found, there's this mounting evidence of atrocities and a wave of momentum that needs to be used to take action.
Dan Sullivan with Refugees International, thank you very much.
Thank you.